What's going on, guys? I'm Jaye the Black. Shout out to everyone that's tuning in. I want to talk about Skip Bayless going back at Stephen A. Smith for comments that Stephen A. Smith made on a podcast recently, where he spoke about how Skip Bayless begged him to do First Take because, in his words, they were struggling. They needed to change some things, and they needed Skip Bayless needed Stephen A. Smith. That's how it was framed. And then Skip Bayless on his podcast, they gave Skip Bayless a podcast. He basically responded, and you could tell he was hurt. He was hurt, but I knew that eventually this could happen between these two. You got two egos. You have two guys who thought that they were the reason why that show was as successful as it is. I will just say this right now. I don't believe First Take was struggling before Stephen A. Smith went on that show. If anything, Stephen A. Smith benefited from being on that show more so than Skip Bayless. Skip Bayless was one of the reasons why I watched First Take. Before then, it was Cold Pizza that he was hosting with Woody Page. That's how far back I've known of Skip Bayless. And I watched him on ESPN. I would watch Cold Pizza every morning. It'd be him, Woody Page, Dana Jacobson. That's how far back I would watch. And even then, I knew that Skip Bayless was a character. So to say that that show was struggling and that they desperately needed Stephen A. Smith, because that's the way Stephen A. Smith is putting it out there. And that's why I think Skip Bayless took issue with it. Because you know Skip Bayless has an ego, and you know Skip Bayless knows, and a lot of other people do as well, is that that show hasn't been the same since he's left. This is why he's getting the big bucks at Fox Sports, because Fox Sports thought that there was a chance that he could end up going back to ESPN, and they gave him as much money as they could possibly give him in order to keep him from going to the competition. Now let's get into this article here from Awful Announcing. Skip Bayless feels betrayed by Stephen A. Smith's recklessly inaccurate comments. How could my brother Stephen A. turn on me like that? Well, I mean, when egos are involved, Skip, people are going to say what they have to say to put themselves over. It's been almost exactly 6 years since we had Stephen A. Smith versus Skip Bayless debate, but the peace streak is officially over as they appear to have a doozy of a discrepancy regarding the history of First Take. Last week, Smith appeared on The Old Man and the Three podcasts hosted by JJ Redick and Tommy Alter. And among his many headline-worthy comments on the podcast, Smith discussed the history of First Take and how he was recruited to partner with Bayless on the show. As Smith recalls, his addition to First Take essentially saved the show. I don't know about that. Now, did First Take go through a weird phase where Skip Bayless was just debating, different people, kind of like what Stephen A. Smith is doing now? Stephen A. Smith is doing that. He's debating people on the show. He's the star of the show. And to me, even then, the show was not struggling. Because again, I know good television, and I still would watch that show whenever I could, because Skip Bayless was a heck of a character. And it would bring people on there, and it would make for good television. I've never really saw it as the show was struggling. But I do think that Stephen A. Smith brought stability to the show. He did. Stephen A. Smith brought a level of stability to that show that it needed. And that is what saved the show. That is what made the show so popular that Skip Bayless was able to get a new contract with a different network because of the work that he and Skip Bayless put on that show. But you also got to understand that, that show has gone downhill ever since Skip Bayless left. And Stephen A. Smith has not done, as much as he has tried, he has not been able to save the show himself. I mean, look where it is now on ESPN. Skip Bayless was doing his thing with First Take, having the 2 live stews. Y'all remember those days when they had the 2 live stews? I actually enjoyed when they had the 2 live stews on the show. I think the 2 live stews was very entertaining on the show. Jamel Hill, Rob Parker, and various other people debating against him, Smith said on Reddick's podcast. And then in 2012, they weren't satisfied with the numbers, the ratings, and the amount of revenue that was being generated. Now, this is Skip Bayless here. Now, I'm going to see if I can play this clip here from the Skip Bayless show. All right.
Here's the guts of what Stephen A. said on the podcast. And I quote, Skip Bayless was doing his thing with First Take, having the 2 live stews, that's Ryan and Doug Stewart, Jamel Hill, Rob Parker, and various other people debating against him. And then in 2012, they weren't satisfied with the numbers, the ratings, and the amount of revenue that was being generated. Skip Bayless, said Stephen A., comes to me in the parking lot of ESPN's campus in Bristol, Connecticut, and he says, I know you've got your plans, you love the NBA, you love being out on the road, you love being in the locker room, but I need you. I've done all that I could to take this as far as it can go. I need you, please. Just give me 3 years. I think we can knock it out of the park, said Stephen A. on the Reddick podcast. Then he continued.
You know, Skip is seething. Like, Skip Bayless is seething. Listening to this, he is seething. Actually having to read this out.
I thought about it. Those were clearly my best options. They weren't about to give me my own show or anything like that at the time. I thought about it for a couple of days and I said I'd do it. 1 month later, we were number 1, and we've been number 1 ever since, said my brother Stephen A. Smith on the Reddick podcast. Let me gather myself. What? I cannot tell you how wrong that was. It was so recklessly inaccurate. It was such shocking fabrication. And my first thought when Ernestine sent this to me to peruse, I thought, how could my brother Stephen A. turn on me like that? On me? Seriously?
Well, yeah, because you see, Stephen A. Smith is a company man. Stephen A. Smith is about, and I believe he even said this about making ESPN as much money as he can for his bosses. You know, he wants to make as much money for his bosses. Stephen A. Smith is now the face of ESPN, and he has to put himself over. That's a wrestling term if you don't know what that is. He has to put himself over and make it seem like he was the savior of a show that is still declining to this day, that he is a part of. And that is why it was so easy for Stephen A. Smith to say this. Now, again, we will never 100% know the truth, but I don't think that Skip Bayless would get on his podcast and say this if he felt like Stephen A. Smith was fibbing on certain things. But let's get into it.
Stephen A. was suggesting that he saved and then made First Take. How can you save and make a show that was already as big a 1 billion to 1 success story as ESPN had ever seen?
That is factual.
The ratings and the revenues were impossibly great when Stephen A. joined me in 2012.
That show saved Stephen A. Smith, not the other way around. And again, I want y'all to understand, I have been a fan of this debate show that they had put together ever since the cold pizza days. when it was Skip Bayless and Woody Page. And there was a reason why Woody left and Skip Bayless was still there. Because they felt like Skip Bayless was the reason why that show had the success that it had, but they added Stephen A. Smith because they felt like their personalities would mesh on a podcast together.
With Stephen A. as my partner, First Take would never touch the NFL Monday ratings that it hit in 2011, pre-Stephen A. And I had taken First Take as far as I could. Seriously? I was just getting started. The rocket had just launched the year before in 2011. Stephen A., how dare you? So look, if Stephen A. had just blurted out what he blurted on that podcast and it had come and it had gone, maybe I wouldn't have chosen to fire back on my podcast. But fortunately or unfortunately, the New York Post wrote an entire story about those remarks. Then it seemed like every website from here in LA to New York picked up or reacted to the Post story.
Like the article I'm looking at right now.
And suddenly I was in danger of this fiction becoming fact. If left unopposed by me, this outrageously revisionist history just might have morphed into bona fide history, and maybe it still will. Maybe it still will become part of that public domain, and in the future, I don't know, maybe every time someone goes to write about the all-time amazing success story, the against all odds rise of First Take, they will accept as gospel that Stephen A. saved and made First Take. But trust me, that is utter untruth. To use one of Stephen A.'s favorite words, that is just blasphemy.
And that was Skip. Listen, Stephen A. Smith, again, as I said before, he has become the face of a declining network. And of course, he's going to put himself in a position to look good. You know, Skip left. He can't give Skip too much credit. He wants to make it seem like Skip Bayless came begging him, please save the show. The show is declining. And I will tell you, even back in 2011, 2012, that show was still hot on that network. That was still a must-view show on ESPN before Stephen A. Smith got there. Stephen A. Smith added a level of social media legitimacy. And people say, what is social media legitimacy? Well, it's when you have somebody like Stephen A. Smith who says and does crazy things go viral. That does help the show. It helps people tune in because you see certain things trending and you're like, what did Stephen A. Smith say? So you tune in, right? He brought that element to it. That what did he just say? You know, and I think that he brought that sort of entertainment element to it, that over the top craziness that he can bring to a conversation or a debate, and that helped the show. But I don't think it helped it to the point to where it made it even better, because again, the show was watchable before he got there. And Skip Bayless knows this. Let me say this: Skip Bayless left ESPN for more money and for an opportunity to create another show. He left First Take, something that he helped build, to build something with Shannon Sharpe that has not only been able to equal the numbers of ESPN, but do just, a little bit better. So he's not only helped create one show on ESPN, but he went to another network and was able to establish Undisputed. So I think that Skip Bayless, if anybody deserves credit for that show being as good as it is, it should be Skip Bayless. Some of you may not like Skip Bayless. You may think that you know, he's a bit goofy. You know, he goes after LeBron or whomever, but we have to give credit where credit is due. And he deserves that credit. And I don't think that he should have to deal with Stephen A. Smith going on podcast talking about how he begged him to help him on that show, when that is not the case whatsoever. You know, Bayless appeared distraught. Let's see, I'm gonna skip through some of this. Bayless appears distraught as he reads the quotes from Smith aloud on his own podcast since departing First Take to launch Undisputed on Fox Sports in 2016. Bayless has repeatedly noted the great relationship he maintains with Smith, that friendship seemed to enhance Skip's feelings of betrayal by his former debate partner. We already went through some of this. First Take has surpassed the ratings it achieved with Bayless, but that was aided by a decision to move the show from ESPN2 to ESPN in 2017, just 6 months after Bayless left for Fox Sports. Smith doesn't even host the show on days when First Take is preempted on ESPN, subsequently bumping it back to ESPN2. Just a little bit more on that. There's little surprise here. Smith wants credit for First Take's success, with Bayless sitting at Fox Sports arguing that he's the one who deserves the credit for ESPN's late morning show. These are two people who are, over the course of 4 years together on First Take, debated thousands of topics, and both to this day believe they never lost one of the debates, not one. So why should either of them depict humility and pass credit off to the other now? I mean, again, as I said before, you got two egos, man. You got two people with two egos that refuses to give the other credit. And again, Stephen A. Smith is going to say what he says because he's the face of the network now, and he wants to let people know, hey, you know, this has a lot more to do with me than Skip Bayless. So let me know what you think in the comment section below. Let me know your thoughts. Like this video and share it. Follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and I'll see y'all next one.